JC Shurburtt of the Big Spur of Inside the Gamecocks. And, of course, I go on his show every single Thursday as well, 11:30 a.m. JC, appreciate you having me on. And appreciate you taking the time to conversate today, my friend. Great to see you once again.
Yeah, great to be with you guys, and good to always enjoy Thursdays, man, because we get this double dip thing going on, and it's a lot of fun. Always a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a blast for sure, JC. And of course, on the show, we talk primarily Gamecocks, but I got to get your thoughts. While I was out of town, I felt like some news that shook up Gamecock Nation, if you will, just because of previous ties. Mike Bobo promoted to OC at the University of Georgia. I understand it's about the Jimmies and Joes and not the X's and O's. And there's a lot of familiarity there. He's been the offensive coordinator at Georgia before, but were you surprised at all? And I guess just your overall thoughts. Again, this is something that did move Gamecock Nation just because of the ties, and maybe disdain's too harsh of a word, but just the feelings around Mike Bobo. Your overall thoughts on that move
Yeah,
and Kirby Smart's staff.
I'll say this about Mike Bobo. I understand people, they were a little butthurt, I guess, lack of a better term, about how he left. I mean, that was a tough deal. It was tough for Shane Beamer. It led to the Marcus Satterfield era. So obviously, I think had Bobo stayed, South Carolina's probably better on offense the last 2 years, more consistent at least. I thought the job he did at South Carolina, considering what he had to work with. I mean, that year, the Gamecocks were just lean at receiver. You had to start Colin Hill, and I think we all kind of figured out after the fact why. Helinski couldn't do it, for lack of a better term. It was just a tough year. Then you get fired in the middle of the Muschamp gets fired in the middle of the season or whatever. So that part of it, I understand people were a little upset with how he left. Am I surprised? No, I think that when you look at what Kirby Smart's been doing, bringing BMAC back, for example, to coach, bringing Muschamp back. He's the D coordinator now. I mean, they kind of got the band back together, to be honest. If you think all three of those guys played at Georgia at the same time, Kirby, Will, and Mike, and they all know each other, they're buddies and stuff. And so I think it's very much a Dabo Swinney type approach at Georgia, with regards to what Kirby's been doing hiring wise lately. I think that he's working with people that he's familiar with, and he's earned that right. I mean, they've been the best team in college football the last 2 years. It's going to be hard. As much as I do like Mike Bobo and his play calling. People always talk about the 2014 game in Columbia and the play call. They were running it up Carolina's butt, and then he called the pass play. It didn't work. But if you think about it, that guy was wide open. I mean, Hudson Mason just kind of one-hopped it out there because one of the Dixon boys got free and got after him, but the play was wide open. So I've always thought he's a pretty good play caller. It's just going to be so hard because Todd Monken, the guy that just left for the Ravens, I thought he is, as a play caller, has been in the zone the last 2 years. I mean, you talk about a team in Georgia that's 4 deep at running back most years. He knows how to use all those guys without being predictable. Their offense this year was very horizontally, figured. That they attacked the perimeter a lot, which is a different kind of deal for Georgia. They didn't have great receivers on that team. They had great tight ends, but he somehow had a passing game that worked. Stetson Bennett was outstanding. It's just hard, as much as I like Mike Bobo and think he's a really good play caller and a heck of a coach. It's just going to be hard to replace that. Plus, you got a new quarterback you got to break in, and Bobo certainly has coached that position before. So I don't know that I was like, a lot of Gamecock fans laughed about it. I don't know that I was moved to laughter or anything. I kind of, I think that's kind of been what's been in the works. But it is from a competitive standpoint. I just think it'd be hard to replace what Todd Monken's done there the last 2 seasons specifically, no matter who you are. So I don't want to say I've learned my lesson about saying Georgia's going to take a step back, right? But that's going to be tough to replace, and we'll see how it goes next season for them on offense.
Yeah, JC, on that note, I mean, again, it's weird to think that, man, the SEC East is wide open when Georgia's literally the back-to-back national champions. But I mean, do you kind of see it that way? I mean, is this as quote unquote wide open as it's been? I mean, I'm going to be picking Georgia to win the East. I don't think anybody's going to be bold enough to not pick the Dogs to go to Atlanta. But I mean, since I gave my way too early predictions, I mean, you think about what's happened. South Carolina picks up Nicholas Harbor. Spencer Rattler, Juice Wells are obviously back, but the Nicholas Harbor edition, plus, they lose Todd Monken. They're obviously going to be revamping at the quarterback position. They're going to have a lot to replace. Obviously, they're replacing these guys with elite talent, right? I mean, Georgia hasn't finished outside of the top like 3 in recruiting in 7 or 8 years. But I don't know, Jason. It's going to be as interesting as it's been in a couple years because Georgia's just been so solid, kind of the same thing over the years. Now, I think this is the most adversity they've faced maybe, recently in the Kirby Smart tenure. And, whether it's South Carolina, it's Tennessee, or it's somebody else, I mean, it's not out of the question. I think Georgia might hit a road bump or two, or it might face some more adversity than they faced over the last couple of years. And maybe that's the Gamecocks in week 3 of the season.
Maybe so. I mean, Georgia's schedule. They had Oklahoma scheduled in week 2, and the league obviously, I think, kind of seeing the writing on the wall where Oklahoma was going to and Texas were both going to come in 2024. I think Tennessee also had a game with Oklahoma that they canceled or moved or something because it's going to become a league game. So they got UT Martin and Ball State. Those are 2 powerhouses, right? And in the Gamecocks, and then UAB, they play at Auburn, who they've owned. Now, who knows if Hugh Freeze can't change that or not? Another road game's at Vandy. They play Florida, of course. From the other division, they get Ole Miss, but Ole Miss comes to Athens. And then the interesting game for me, they moved this Georgia-Tennessee game is in the same week as the South Carolina-Tennessee game was last year in Neyland. Saturday, November 18th, on what used to be SoCon Saturday in the SEC. Now it's our Sunbelt Saturday, if you will. Now, I mean, that game could end up being for the East right there, 2 weeks before Atlanta. So it's an interesting schedule. I think it's backloaded, obviously, with some of the tougher games, except for South Carolina. But games just got to go down there to Athens, where they've actually won more recently. Against the Bulldogs than they've won in Columbia. I mean, they won in Athens in 2019, obviously. But, I don't know. In Georgia, it's going to be interesting, because they had just enough coming back this year with their defensive guys like Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith to where they survived losing those draft picks, right? They just reloaded. Mm-hmm. Well, now those guys are gone. And so you kind of wonder, I'm sure they'll be immensely talented, but will they be ready? Will they be as dominant? Will they be as locked in? Because they have faced some adversity and all that. But Georgia's going to be an interesting case study next year as far as, everybody says that they're now Alabama. Well, Alabama just kept on going. Can Georgia do that would be the question that I would ask heading into next season.
Yeah, with Bama, and I think what Georgia is trying to build, JC, it's almost like today's bench warmers are tomorrow's draft picks. That's generally how they operate. Yeah. So we will see if that continues. JC, let's move into a little bit of recruiting. I know it's sort of a dead period, but over the last couple of days, I've had my folks talking in the Big Cock Club in regards to some of the crystal balls that have been coming in for some high-profile prospects. And I know that a guy that you are really high on, and I've been asked about a lot, is Jonathan Paylor of the 9.5 composite. What can you tell us about him? And then just 2024 as a whole in recruiting. Again, I know it's a bit of a dead period right now. I think I saw Blake Franks mention something with his recruiting, saying he's not committing on February the 20th. When he comes up with a date, he'll post it on Twitter. And, of course, Maz Bennett was in the comments section saying, hey, there's only one fan base commenting to you. It's South Carolina. Make the move. So, of course, the momentum is still there. But just overall, 2024 recruiting news or tidbits that you might have for us.
Yeah, Jonathan Paylor, they call him the missile, and it's how he plays. He's like a missile, like he darts up and down the field. Elite speed, you can never have too many guys like that. He's built a little bit like Bruce Ellington, probably faster in a straight line. Probably has as much wiggle as Bruce too. now that I think about it. But South Carolina, if you look at kind of, you're always looking at recruiting as making progress, right? Well, I thought that heading into the 2023 cycle, a good sign of progress was simply sign more blue chip high school players, more 4 and 5 star high school guys, just increase that number. And they did. And then 2024, you kind of look at it like, well, you need to do that again. And also, the state of North Carolina, which I've always kind of been of the belief the state of North Carolina is very important for South Carolina to recruit. And that's kind of a key to building this program and to maximizing it. This staff has done an amazing job, though, working around that. I don't think they signed a single guy from North Carolina this year by going into the DMV, working more north-south, working Miami to Maine, really, is South Carolina's primary recruiting area. And I think that's been smart. Well, now you look back at it, well, Paylor's a North Carolina kid, and they've got there's a D tackle out of the Concord, Charlotte area that they're in on. So you can kind of see that starting, them getting a little light at the end of the tunnel in that important state. So you start doing that, you continue to do what you're doing in the DMV, continue to dominate in-state recruiting. The players they recruit out of Georgia, I call them, they're tier 2, and I don't mean that as an insult. Like tiers are different than like rankings. Tiers mean, all right, these are the guys that are really, really good, and most of the SEC's offered them, but they're just below Georgia's offer pool because Georgia's kind of at this, or maybe they evaluate the kid and they're like, we like this guy better or whatever. Georgia can't take them all. So to get guys out of that state like Michael Smith, like Wendell Gregory, like the 7 guys they signed out of Georgia this past cycle, Trovon Ball, Jalen Kilgore, those guys. That's exactly what needs to be happening in that state. I like what they do in Florida. They get, athletes from there, guys that can play, guys that love the game, like you get from Florida kids. And you go into Jacksonville and you win a battle for Pup Howard, that kind of thing. And so you start to look at it, Chris, and Jonathan Paylor, yes, he's important because he's a missile and he's a receiver. And he's a big play guy. He can return kicks, whatever. But to get him out of that state can start, sometimes players are kind of looking for permission to go to a school that may not be a blue blood. And I think it kind of gives maybe some North Carolina kids some permission. Well, South Carolina's right here. Let's give them a look. Also, the area of North Carolina he's from the Piedmont, the Triad, basically, the Greensboro, Winston-Salem, Burlington area. Burlington's right down, I-40 between Greensboro and Durham. That's not been a kind area, even when South Carolina was recruiting North Carolina heavily and well. That part right there, just those kids just tend to go to Clemson or North Carolina or Virginia Tech, wherever. And so getting a kid from there, I think, is an important thing as well. I think the last kids from that area Carolina got were the twins. Gosh, I forgot their names. One was a tackle, one was a center at Carolina during the Spurrier era. So, I think it's overwhelmingly positive, that momentum. You mentioned Blake Franks. I think South Carolina's in a good position there. I think they continue to be in really good shape with every kid they want in state. I think this class, Chris, you start kind of piecing together the numbers and you look at the guys that are leaning to Carolina. And we're not even in June yet, which is usually a heavy month for recruiting, and a lot of welcome homes that month, right? And you're like, man, this could legitimately be a top 10 recruiting class when all is said and done. Could. Can't guarantee that, but it could be. It's set up that way right now if this momentum continues.
And JC, you look at the 24 class, Pringle, Gregory, Smith, Bennett, and Reno. Those are your 5 commitments right now. You sit obviously 6th in the country in recruiting. It's very early on. For the 2023 class, I'll ask you this, JC. Nicholas Harbor was the obvious gem of your class, right? He was the dude everybody wanted. The class, it almost felt kind of like it centered around him. I mean, obviously he's just one of many great pickups, but do you feel like there's a guy like that in the 24 class? Is it somebody that's already committed? I mean, do you feel there's going to be that one guy that if you get him, that's going to be sort of the exclamation point that Nicholas Harbor was for 23?
Yeah, I would go with another kid from the DMV, and it won't be easy. To get this guy. There's a lot of competition, but they're right there. 5-star Dylan Stewart is a defensive end from up there in the DC area. I think South Carolina, that's a kid. His recruitment probably will go the distance, right? All the way till signing day, probably. Not a guarantee, obviously, but South Carolina has so much momentum in that area right now that they are a legit factor to sign him. And I think at the end of the day, five-star defensive ends, five-star defensive end. You need to get the guys from Friendship Collegiate Academy um, in DC. I've been to that school. It's an interesting place, but they put out good players just about every year. 6'5", 235 pounds. Um, that would be the guy right now I would point to and go, all right, that would be the cherry on top of Sunday, just like Nick Harbor.
For sure. It's going to be a lot of fun to follow. And of course, the Gamecocks have as much momentum, if not more momentum, than anybody on the recruiting trail in college football. JC, let's move off recruiting and into this basketball team and what this season sort of is. Of course, a tough loss on Tuesday night. Gamecocks lose to Vandy by double digits in a game that I think you look down the schedule, JC, was probably one of the more winnable games left. I mean, of course, you go into this weekend against LSU, a team that has not won a game in this calendar year. The Bayou Bengals are on a 13-game losing streak. But just taking a look at really the last two, JC, I mean, you get a big road win and then you lose to Vandy. But the theme in both those games, JC, more so importantly, I think, is G.G. Jackson and sort of his limited role, if you will. At one point was playing pretty much all of the minutes, right? Was scoring in the double digits, upwards of 20 points, 20-plus points on a night-in, night-out basis. He's struggling of late. Just sort of what do you make of his recent struggles and South Carolina basketball as a whole? Obviously, we all know the reality of this season, and it's just sort of we're trying to limp to the finish line at this point. But I think the bigger story is kind of G.G. Jackson. I think how Lamont Paris is handling that, which I actually applaud him for being willing to put his foot down and just do everything he can to put the best product out there. But just overall thoughts on kind of how it played out, because it's a really interesting story within a tough season for South Carolina men's basketball.
Yeah, it's I called it sad today on the show. It's the only word I can use to describe it. And I don't mean that in an overtly critical way. It's kind of just sad right now. You got a terrific player in G.G. Jackson that's not playing well. He's struggling. His body language is not good. He's not getting minutes. He's jacking up 3-pointers from everywhere, and that's not good sound basketball. Basketball's still a team sport. I think sometimes at the pro level, it can become an individual sport a little bit, but basketball's still a team sport. You got to play within yourself to make sure that you're giving your team and yourself the best chance to be successful, and that's just not happening right now. I don't know why this team struggles at home more so than on the road too. I mean, it's baffling to me. I'm pretty sure the environment at the Colonial Life Arena is lackluster at this point in the season, to say the least. But it's, I just think that it's sad. It's a sad situation to see right now, and I think it's very important that Lamont Paris and GG and everybody involved in it kind of get back on the same page and finish this thing out the right way. Because, you don't want a guy like that who could have gone anywhere in the country from the city of Columbia, from your backyard, to all of a sudden have a toxic experience overall and leave on a bad note, because that's going to hurt you in terms of, convincing the next G.G. Jackson to come to South Carolina and stay at home. So I think that, you say it's 2-11 in the league. They're not going anywhere, but I do think these last 5 games of the regular season are going to be important for, ancillary ways, in ancillary ways, ways that will impact the program long term. And hopefully they get it, kind of get it back together. But yeah, it was disappointing for me. I actually watched the game. I was kind of like, okay, well, good win at Ole Miss. Let's see what they can do here. And obviously 18 points at halftime, down by 20. There's no chance you're going to win, that one after that. So I do think there's some things that have to happen with men's basketball here in the last home stretch of the season that, could potentially be positive or negative for the program moving forward, depending on how it goes.
Yeah, and JC, I think you make a great point on Gigi Jackson's experience at South Carolina, because I think we were all just, at least I was just kind of looking at it as, okay, he came to South Carolina. That's a vote of confidence. That's a positive for the program. But if he doesn't have a good experience, and these guys all talk, right? All these players talk to each other. And, if Gigi Jackson, I'm not saying he's going to go out of his way to like rip the program or rip Lamont Paris, but if he's not promoting it and repping it to the way that you'd like him to, right? It's you didn't really get the positive out of him coming there, and it could be served or used against you as a negative. I think you're absolutely right. So rallying the troops a bit, if you will, in these last 5 games is super important. On a more positive note, JC, on the hardwood, I do think we need to take a moment to recognize Dawn Staley's program. My goodness. I mean, hey, the game of the year. No, it's not. The Gamecocks just dominate. Nobody can
Yeah.
touch what they're doing. My question to you, JC, is simply this, and I don't want to put any jinx on or anything, but I mean, realistically, do you think there's anybody that's going to beat this team? Or could you see this team going wire to wire and finishing this thing off with a perfect record?
How about what if you? All right, so UConn had some injured players, right?
Mm.
I don't, and I have no idea. I haven't looked at their situation and see if they'll get anybody back or not. Uh, I would think that would be possible, kind of if they were at full strength in a Final Four setting or something. But I, honestly, when this basketball team is on its A game and when they're out there, and they don't just Chris, they're just so hard to beat because they're not only immensely talented, and they just have great players that they can run at you in waves. Dawn Staley preaches defense, and this her teams guard and defend and frustrate the what out of you, and they don't allow you to breathe, and so those types of teams are much harder to beat. I think than maybe a team that's a great shooting team or a skilled team that they go out there and have a bad shooting night, and then they don't play much defense, and yeah, you can beat them if the other team's red hot, but Dawn Staley's team is just the it's not only all the talent and all that they're throwing at you and the confidence and all that, it's the experience, blah 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 blah. It's the style of play too. I mean, because it is like putting your face in a grinder. I think to play against those girls in that sport, because they just don't let you up off the mat. So I would lean toward it's looking good, without jinxing it for this group to go undefeated and win its second straight national title right now.
Yeah, JC, I feel like at this point, if you're picking against South Carolina, you're just trying to make a point. Like there's no real
Yeah,
reason to pick against them, right? I mean, it's until we see different. So, I've said this before. Dawn Staley and her team, they truly are the embodiment of it feels good to be good because they are the best, and it's not even remotely
yes,
close. It's not even remotely close. Last thing, JC, and again, I appreciate you being gracious with your time every single Thursday. Of course, he joins us at 1:15. JC Shurburtt of the Big Spur of Inside the Gamecocks. We got to talk baseball, man. Opening day eve, and I know you guys have had Monty Lee on your show. Didn't Mark Kingston as well? I think Mark
yeah,
Kingston joined your. Yeah, so you've had
both
Kingston, you've
coaches,
had
yeah.
you've had Monty Lee. As this 2023 season gets underway tomorrow, I'll just ask you just kind of your overall thoughts on what you've heard from those two guys and what this ball club is, and how you expect things to shake out in this season, just based off those conversations with both Kingston and Lee, if you will.
Sure. Kingston seemed pretty confident, kind of different than he normally, he was real relaxed. And, I think that when you look at the situation they had last year with the arms and all the injuries there, the one thing he did repeat over and over was we have to stay healthy. We have to stay healthy. And obviously, after going through what you did last year, you're probably going to talk about that a bunch. But, the pitching staff's deep. The three starters. I mean, Sanders is probably going to be a first rounder. Noah Hall is one of the better pitchers in the SEC. And then Mahoney's back. And all three of those guys throw gas, man. I mean, it's like 96, 97. I don't know that there's a team in the country that has that kind of smoke on their pitching, the starting pitching. They'll figure out who the closer is going to be. I think one of the things that really was bad about last year was all the midweek losses to these, the Presbyterians of the world. Did they lose to Presbyterian? I think they did.
Yeah.
USC upstates of the world. That's going to change this year because you're not trotting out. You're going to be trotting out a guy or two in those midweek games that probably could be weekend starters in other programs. And so that's going to help. Now, the issue is going to be hitting. I don't know that this team, and like you mentioned earlier, on our show, a lot of new faces. A lot of guys that didn't really play a lot last year. Braylon Wimmer being the exception. And you got guys that have been around, but they all need to take a step forward. And talking to Monty Lee, I kind of got the impression from him, and what he was saying was it's going to maybe be a little bit of a work in progress, but they're going to try everything they can and get creative with it. Because they don't really have a whole lot of power and stuff. They do have some speed; they can steal some bases, that kind of thing. And then the third part of it, I think this team this year is going to be a much better defensive team. Braylon Wimmer did not make an error the whole preseason. None. No errors at shortstop. Shortstop, second base, shortstop, right? Or second base.
Yep.
He's in the middle of the infield. I'm not a baseball. I'm not a baseball expert. I'm a big fan of the game. But
he was at second last year. He is going to play short this year.
This year. Yeah. So that guy, that's very important because I don't think that the Gamecocks have been as good defensively as we've been accustomed to around here the last couple of years. So, we'll see what happens with that. I think, I thought, well, hey, they should sweep UMass Lowell this weekend until you came on the show and you started throwing all these stolen base numbers at me. I'm like, oh my God, this could be a really frustrating weekend if and somebody on our show also said, well, the best way to keep them from stealing bases is don't let them get on base. So there you go. But I'm looking forward to seeing how it plays out, especially now that, after what you said about UMass Lowell, I think that's kind of a neat kind of probably a different style of baseball than we're used to seeing coming from those guys. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. But, I would be remiss if I sat here and said this team's going to knock it all over the yard and be this explosive, powerful offense. I think they're going to be – I think the question is, can they be good enough? Because the bottom line is winning and losing, whether it's 1-0 or 15-13. So I think that's just going to be the determining factor. Is this going to be a group that can go out and win a bunch of 4-2 games, 5-2 games, something like that, or are they going to be losing a bunch of 2-1s? That kind of thing. And so I think that's going to determine the success or lack thereof of the season.
Yeah, I think consistency offensively, JC, and again, like you mentioned, it's baseball. Some nights you're going to have to win the 2-1, but can you win a 9-8 game? I think that too. Can you hang around in those type of ball games? And obviously, I could go on and on for days, but I didn't bring up the UMass Lowell statistics to scare you at all because I think the Gamecocks should sweep as well. But it's just, these Northeastern teams, you don't think much of them, but they've got some ball players as well. But I do think it's a weekend that it's so interesting, JC, and it's funny. I've had this conversation with our good friend Brad Crawford, and Brad, admittedly, not a huge baseball guy, which is totally fine. But, there's a lot of people that don't keep up with it the way that some others do, that like they just can't compute. How could a South Carolina lose to the Citadel or lose to Presbyterian or lose to USC Upstate? And it's because you can't bring the football school of thinking into baseball. Coastal Carolina won a national championship. That would never happen in football. But it's interesting, football style points matter. And I always say in baseball they don't, but it almost feels like, JC, that early on in this season, because of how pivotal of a season this is and how bad last year was, I think style points do kind of matter. I think, being able to hit the ball over the yard against this pitching, I think it's important because it's like if you can't do it in the non-conference, there's nothing that'll give you hope that you're going to have a successful SEC season.
Yeah, I'm there with you. I think people would probably comfortable would be the right would be the description that I would use. Fans are going to be a lot more comfortable if the Gamecocks are scoring 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 runs against these guys that the lower teams. And you may lose 1 or 2 along the way. That is baseball. But Ray Tanner's team in 2000 went 56-10, 50-6 in the regular season. One of those 6 losses was to Elon at home. People don't remember that, So I think that team won 25 SEC games too. That's the nature of the sport. You're never going to go undefeated and all that. But I do think our fans will be more comfortable heading into SEC play if this bunch, does put runs on the board and the pitching is as advertised. And there are some, style point type games. When you got to win 10-0 or whatever. That's going to make people feel good. heading into that what should be a very challenging 30-game SEC schedule.
JC Shurburtt of Inside the Gamecocks, the Big Spur. JC, I know you got to get out of here again. I appreciate you taking the time. Thank you so much, and looking forward to doing it yet again next week, my friend, and looking forward to a fantastic baseball season as well, man. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Thanks, guys. Y'all have a good one.